Hello everyone, it's time for another deck profile, this time on an updated Drajeweled deck, or in this case, Drajeweled Mask, the D version of Reverse basically, the Masque Units. And I have to say, this is just an awesome concept overall in D series because, yeah, a nice reference to OG Reverse, and basically Masque is just D series version of it, and I just really like the concept of it. And watching the anime, seeing how the character who played Drajeweled Michiru basically switched side, I was waiting for a Masque unit ever since Zorga Mask was first revealed, so we got Drajeweled Mask, which is awesome. But anyway, we haven't gotten an updated deck profile of this for a while. In fact, pretty much no support for Drajeweled for 2 sets straight until set 10 because the last wave of Drajeweled and basically the first Drajeweled support was actually set 7. So that's a while for Drajeweled support. So I'm glad they actually gave something big for that long wait. Because yeah, Drajeweled for a while was lacking one big thing, a countercharger. Which in this set we also got. Sure, the timing of it isn't the best, but it's still a countercharger, which is very helpful. Because one problem Drajeweled had back before set 10 is basically counterblast issues. It uses a lot of counterblasts, especially one of Drajeweled's skills requires you counterblast. Luckily it's not the main one, but there's a good number of cards that uses counterblast, including one of your main attackers. So that was the main problem with Drajeweled overall. It was just the counterblast issue. And with set 10, we got the new Masque, which also introduced the concept of Masque Units, which I like. So it was something big enough to basically worth the wait, even though I would be saying, spoiler alert, probably really iffy, like a side grade, who knows, depending on preference. And there's a countercharger as well. Not much Drajeweld support overall, but it is big enough for me to make this deck profile, and basically does changes up the deck because the lineup is now a little different. So what do I think about the deck overall? I think it's very interesting and fun. The fact that you're doing grade manipulation from your soul is already a pretty awesome concept, and I really love how each grade represents a soul of a flame, hence the artwork of the 4 gems. I really love this. And I was hoping that the new Drajeweled Mask, or at least another form of new Drajeweled, will probably have something where for every different grade you soul blasted, a skill activates in a certain way, because I think that would be a cool concept too, because every gem represents 1 grade, so every different grade you soul blast activates 1 gem, something like that. But overall, it's just awesome. So I will just tell you the main playstyle of this deck. Basically, focus around having different grades in your soul. You need your 4 different grades in your soul is basically your main requirement. Other than that, it just fights really aggressively because of that one skill that requires you with your 4 different grades. But anyway, let's get on with the deck profile because Drajeweled is awesome. So first off, the ride line. Here's Julius Draco Kid, that's the starter. And then we go to Jewel Core Dragon, where the skill, when it's rolled upon by Jewel Neil, you can call it from soul to rearguard. In which, on rearguard, when this card attack or boosts plus 5k, and at the end of the battle, goes to soul. This skill is mandatory. Yep, basically early game aggression and still goes back to soul. So that is pretty good, and that skill is generic, so keep that in mind. You can use that in any other deck spread, basically. And then we go to Jewel Neil, where when an attack hits, soul charge 1. Sometimes it happens, it doesn't, but early game it usually does. But the second skill, where when you ride a Drajeweled on top of it, you can soul charge 1, and then you have 3 or more different grade cards in your soul, you draw a card along with it. By the time you ride Drajeweled, you're going to guarantee your 0, 1, and 2. So you're guaranteed that draw. But there can be a card that can manipulate that a bit. But there is that one card that you might need to be careful of with this part of the skill, just to avoid contradictions. Just a little spoiler, but it is just helpful. It's just mainly used for ride deck skill. And luckily, the first skill still works on rearguard because you have calling from soul. So I'm just going to have that in mind for people who just care. And finally, the main grade 3 Demonic Jewel Dragon Drajeweled. So first off, the first skill is Counterblast 1. Once per turn, you can Soul Charge 2. If the 2 cards are different grades, you also draw a card. Sometimes a hit, sometimes a miss. So sometimes a hit, sometimes a miss. So just keep that in mind, but the Soul Charging 2 just really helps because it increases your soul count with possibly different grades. And the nice extra draw power as well can be nice as well. But the second skill is the main one, where when this card attacks a Vanguard, Soul Blast 4 cards with different grades, and then choose one of your opponent's rear guards, change its power to 1, and if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, plus 1 crit. Yeah, that's pretty powerful. It doesn't cost counterblast for one. That's very important, so they can't damage deny you. And this is Dark State we're talking about, and of course for this deck, we're going to have Soul Manipulation. So the 4 different grades in Soul on your very first grade 3 ride isn't even hard. Just letting you know. So regardless if you go first or second, this is just very good aggression because draining your opponent's power to 1 is just very powerful. It nullifies whatever triggers they had beforehand, so it could even go against over triggers. And spoiler alert, we also have a re-standing rear guard in this deck, so most likely your opponent will have to guard that attack first before this one. But yeah, this is just overall very strong, and plus that 1 crit, devastating. So that's it for the ride deck. On to the main deck. This is actually not going to be for Persona Ride reasons, but you still need to run the extra 3 copies of Drajeweled. Just letting you know. Because Masque Units require a different card name from the Masque Unit itself because the idea of Masque is throwing away your old identity. In this case, Drajeweled, this is his old identity, so the Masque is going to throw away his old identity for his skill. In which, before we go to the Masque Unit itself, first off, 4 Masque of Hydragram. This is going to be a weird lineup when it comes to Masque of Hydragram, because depending on the deck, you might want to run the Masque of Hydragram Searcher, the Dragontree Wretch. I'll just spoil that skill right now because I don't have it in this deck, but the skill of the Dragontree Wretch for Masque of Hydragram Searcher is that on place you can counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1 to search for a copy of Masque of Hydragram from your deck and add to your hand, and you get a Dragontree marker on top of it. And of course, those will be very good. The only thing is, this is Drajeweled that does use Counterblast, so depending on what deck you play, you might want to prefer to run more Masque of Hydragrams because Counterblast can be an issue in certain decks, so that's why I'm running 4 Masque of Hydragrams in this deck. But anyway, Masque of Hydragram is a generic card with no nation that could be used in any deck, as long as they have a Masque Unit where you play it by looking at the top 5 cards of your deck, and then you search for 1 Masque Unit or 1 Dragontree unit from among them and put it to your hand. The Dragontree Wretch is still Dragontree, that's why there's a debatable little split that you can do there. And I thought of it too, but Counterblast has been the thing I've been thinking about this deck, even though I haven't exactly been experiencing Counterblast issues, even though, spoiler alert, the new Drajeweled does use Counterblast for its main skill. But it is up to player preference if they want to use the Masque of Hydragram at 2 out of 4 of. So first off, I just explained that first skill where it just looks the top 5 for a Dragontree Wretch or the Masque Unit, but the second skill is the main part. On drop zone, if your Vanguard is not Masque, you can play this skill to reveal the Masque Unit from your hand and ride it. And then you put this to Soul, and if your opponent's at grade 3 or greater, you activate Persona Ride at the same turn. So if you went second, you can do a superior Persona Ride. That is 1 turn early on a Persona Ride. That is pretty powerful. And the fact that this card also goes to Soul is an extra bonus, especially in Drajeweld's case, because this is Dark State, it needs Soul. Yeah, that is just pretty good, and of course it's a grade 3, so it's another count right there that you can do. So yeah, it's just an overall depends on player preference how many you want to run. If a deck runs a bit in Counterblast, you run more of Hydragrams. If it doesn't, you can run the Dragontree Wretch and then play 2 of these. But this one, you probably would run 4 just because of Counterblast reasons. Now, we go to Karmatic Demonic Jewel Dragon Drajeweled Mask. I really love this Force Evolved Drajeweled. First off, all the Masque units have the same first skill, where they have this skill where you cannot ride this on top of any other unit other than a form of itself. So yes, you can only ride this on top of Drajeweled, and that goes for every Masque unit depending on what deck you're playing. But the main skills are, first off, the first one where once per turn, you can remove a Drajeweled card that is different name from this one, aka throwing away his old identity, from anywhere from hand, soul, field, or drop, and then you can put 2 cards from your drop zone to your soul and plus 1 crit. The fact that you put 2 cards in soul from your drop zone is just really good because that's choice soul charging, which is going to be very powerful in this deck because you need the different grades. The 1 extra crit is just an extra bonus right there, which is also really good pressure. And this is something to keep in mind. Your opponent doesn't need to be in grade 3 for that 1 crit in comparison to original Drajeweled. Keep that one in mind, because that 1 crit can really pressure your opponent a lot. But the fact that you can just put any 2 cards from your drop zone to soul is already quite powerful, especially when there's still soul calling. But the main skill is, auto when this card attacks a Vanguard, cost Counterblast 1, Soul Blast 4 cards with different grades, choose 2 of your opponent's rear guards and retire, and then your opponent's Vanguard is drained to 1. Yeah, so compared to original Drajeweled, that one doesn't cost counterblast for its main skill, but this one does, but with the extra 2 retires. Of course, that one also gets a crit, but this one also gets a crit. So this could be considered side grade or not because the counterblast is on its main skill, which is one thing that many people have a problem with. But the Retire 2 has been very powerful, and I have to say, I really like it. I haven't been really having too many counterblast issues based on what I've been noticing. And of course, because I'm one of those people who can manage my resources properly. And I have to say, overall, this is just pretty good. The choice soul charging from the drop zone is just very powerful, even if it is restricted to using the original Jejeeweled. Technically, there's 2 of them. And yeah, the main skill is locked with the counterblast. It's still manageable. But yeah, the 2 retires is really good for disruption, I have to say. And overall, it's just awesome. So that's it for the grade 3 lineup. To the grade 2 lineup, here's Rockador. Rockador gets plus 10k power of your opponent's grade 3 or greater on attack. And that is if your soul has 4 or more different grades in soul, which is going to be doable because it's Drajeweled. And the second skill is that when you soul blast 4 or more cards with different grades with your Vanguard's ability, aka Drajeweled, while your opponent's at grade 3, you can counterblast 1 to stand this unit. And here's your multi-attacker. And yes, you must run 4 of this. Unfortunately, we don't have the promo, which is also a restander, but this is a workable substitute. And of course, this is one of your big beaters. Since we don't have the promo, we run this. The Counter Charger, where when this card attacks, if your Vanguard is Drajeweled, this card gives us 2k power, and at the end of the battle, if you soul blasted 4 more cards with different grades during this turn with your Vanguard's ability, you can retire this unit to counter charge 1. Unfortunately, it has to be right after Drajeweled uses its skill, but it is counter charging, so it's just helpful. Next, for a generic card, I run 2 copies of the Ride Deck Fodder card. So all the Ride Deck Fodder cards have this skill where when discarded from hand during the ride phase, you can soul blast 1, put this to the bottom of the deck to draw a card. This is what I mean that for Jejeeweled, you might need to be careful because if you use this in the early game for discard fodder, you can accidentally soul blast the wrong grade, or not even have the right grade count in soul. But this is still pretty good just to use that. But you mainly use it for the second skill where on place from hand, if you persona ride during the turn, counterblast 1, choose a card from your soul and call it to rear guard. And if you call it, soul charge 1. One thing that I do experience with this deck sometimes is the lack of field presence because original Jejeeweled lets you draw a card. That is a little lost with Jejeeweled Mask, but the nice trade-off is that you get to choose what to put in soul. So that is a better preference in many occasions. So I'm just using this card to basically regain some of your pluses. Now, if you do want to do a Masque Hydragram split with the Dragontree Wretch, I would probably replace this for the Dragontree Wretch, which I have actually thought of is to use Dragontree Wretch instead of this card. But I do want some more advantage because, yeah, this deck can sometimes lack the hand as well because of the loss of regular Jejeweled's draw skill. So I'm just saying. So this does help. So that's it for the grade 2 lineup. To the grade 1 lineup. First off, Falcate Performer. I would have to say this card may be less necessary, but I still like it for just in case measures because when this card boosts, you can choose 1 card from your drop zone that has a different grade card from your soul and put that card to your soul. So basically, it helps you fix up your missing grades, which is why this card is really good and it's free, which is another reason why I decided to run this. This is still cuttable down to 2, which I am thinking about, but sometimes the 3rd copy does help, and the fact that you can just fix your soul lineup is just very helpful. And then 3 Brainwash Swirlers, which is a generic Dark State card that lets you soul charge 1 on place, and every card that you soul charge, this card gets plus 5k power if you are at grade 3. Yeah, this is just pretty good. I mean, it's a 13k beater, and hence why many people would run 4, and I probably will run the 4th copy to take out a Falcate. Because, yeah, Falcate has become a little less useful now because of Jejeeweled Mask letting you just pick any cards from your drop zone to soul. I just still kind of like Falcate, so I'm just doing a 3-3 split for now. But who knows, I might actually take out 1 Falcate for the 4th Swirler. And then we go to the 4 PGs, with one of them being the Blitz Sentinel. For trigger lineup, obvious over trigger is obvious. We need to go full on aggression with 8 crits. 3 draws, maybe run 7 crits with a 4th draw. For heals, 2 of them being counter heals. So that's it for this deck profile on my Jejeeweled Mask deck. What do you guys think of it? What other changes would you make and what other cards would you recommend? For now, we don't have that promo, so do not recommend that one. But that promo is definitely going to be run in this deck. I've seen people run Goomnum Ram just for draw, especially with all the random cards in Soul. But there is Goomnum Ram that could help you regain some advantage. But I don't like the Soul Blast 3 part, which is also a little bit troublesome sometimes with Drajeweled. So I will have to say Falcate is probably my better option in my opinion. But other than that, what other options would you recommend? Would you guys run the Dragontree Wretch? Maybe cut down on the Masque of Hydragram, which I am thinking about cutting down to 3 copies because 4 might be a little too much. But overall, this deck has been working out pretty well, and overall, I like it. Just keep in mind Masque of Hydragram with the Counterblast, but this deck runs a bit of Counterblast, so it is probably better to run more Masque of Hydragrams. And overall, I like Drajeweled. Drajeweled is just awesome, and I like the deck and its style. So, and of course the character as well, because Michiru is a pretty cool character. But in that, go ahead and tell me what you guys think of it. Just remember, this is just my style, so you can always have yours. But in that, see you all next time.